a lot of the entrepreneurs that have done quite well, they've usually gone through something in their childhood that was tough. But unfortunately, my parents loved me a lot.
To build a conglomerate.
Why couldn't you fuck me up a little bit? Why couldn't you mess me up a little bit?
Oh, by the way, how do I look?
You're him. You're that guy.
This is it. This is him. Hello, welcome to Bad Advice, where we give founders real truth about startups. Today, I have Yash with me. Thank you for being here. I'll let him do the intro. I don't want to spoil it too much.
Amazing. Excited to be here. I'm excited to be with that guy, with him. So yeah, my name's Yash, and let's see. So I'm going to start with a little bit about my personal background. So I was born in India, like many people in this amazing country. I'm an immigrant. I lived there for like 9 years, and then I was born in the city of the Taj Mahal,
Oh, wow.
Agra. That's the only exciting part of that city, by the way.
Oh, really? Okay.
There's not much else going on there. And then I moved here when I was 9 years old. Well, I didn't choose to. My parents decided to move here. Grew up in a city called Brampton, which is, it's kind of like India, actually. And then I went to school at Western in London, Ontario. Spent a few years there. Didn't quite finish my degree. We can talk more about that as well. But after that, I moved to Toronto. I was working. I had some friends who were already working in the startup world, and they told me that, okay, if you're not having a good time in school, go do something you're interested in. So started working in the Toronto startup ecosystem, worked for a bunch of early stage companies, and then did that for about 5 years full time, stayed in Toronto for 5 years full time. And then some of my best friends had already been working remotely out of Latin America, and I'd visited them in 2018 in Colombia, and I visited them in November actually.
Yeah.
And
great timing. Yeah.
I know, man. It was like the week before I visited them, it was freezing cold here. And I distinctly remember before I visited them, I was sitting in my apartment in downtown. I'd come back from work and I just like sat down in front of my couch, not on my couch, in front of my couch on the ground. And I looked out and it was just dark and cold. And I was like, oh, this is kind of, I don't know what to do right now. And then the next week I was in Colombia, and I was just shocked at like, oh, life can be like this. Like I can work remotely from this part of the world. And so I came back in 2018, and then there was kind of a bug in me that, okay, I want to arrange life this way. So in 2021, January 2nd, I moved to Mexico during the pandemic. And then I spent, for the last 4 years and 3 months, I've spent every winter in Latin America.
Nice.
And so I was there until a week and a half ago.
I'm envious. Tell us how.
I'm trying to, that's why I tell this story. Like the more people we can convince, the more people we can bring down, it's a good time. And there's WeWorks there and all this. So for the last 4 years, basically I've been spending more than half the year in Latin America, in Brazil, Colombia, Argentina, and Mexico. And so earlier this year, I was also in Brazil for most of the time. I was over Carnival, which is a really fun time. Even built the team for my last startup, which I'll talk about in a bit as well. But yeah, I've been kind of splitting my time there and here. And then professionally, like I said, I started off working for a company called Foodora, which is a food delivery company.
Oh, cool name.
Yeah, it was a rocket internet company, which is like a European VC basically. And yeah, it was really awesome. My first job was in sales. I had no business getting that job. I was the worst salesperson in the world. But I'd learned from my friends around how to be kind of persistent and following up. And the guy who hired me is still a good friend of mine. I know he regretted hiring me early on. But eventually he was able to teach me some good skills. And so worked early stage, did that job for about a year, was part of the launch team for this company, which was really cool. And then did a coding boot camp at BrainStation. Then from there, worked at a couple other early stage companies. Then about 5 years ago, took the leap of faith and started my first proper startup, which was called EverySay. Lost all my money very quickly. And then from there, basically started to do some consulting work in the public sector. So was pretty excited about, and still am pretty excited about the public sector, government, and improving the interface between people and government. After that, after doing some work in consulting in the public sector, worked with advocacy groups, nonprofits, a lobbying firm. After that, ended up finding this investor from BC, and he was pretty interested in playing in the kind of startup game. He had some money to spend, and this was, the heyday of the pandemic when everybody had too much cash.
Yeah.
Didn't know what to do
Gotta
with
get
it.
rid of your cash.
Exactly, right? So he invested some money and got to do that for a couple of years. And that was a really fun journey, and we can, dig into that more as well. There's some bad advice from there that, we can talk about. So did that for a little bit, and unfortunately, we had about $300,000 that we were supposed to receive, but after about 260 or so, or sorry, 240K that we were receiving in wire transfers, unfortunately, our investor was going through a bit of a divorce, and so that meant that no more money could be wired over.
You're like the kids,
I know, yeah. We were like the kids, exactly. You went through the divorce as well. And so we just hit monetization with that startup.
Oh, no.
Right? Like a few weeks before he kind of told us that, oh, yeah, I can't send any more money. And I thought, we still got another 60K. We were running super lean. And he was trying to create a path to arrange more money through his network. And I thought, okay, this might actually work, but unfortunately that just cut things short. I'd built out a team, 2 full-timers in Latin America, really awesome people, very bullish on the LATAM market. And then, I kind of had to cut things short there, and then took a little bit of time to relax, and then worked for another startup called Fleet, which was really fun. And then, I quit that in January. It wasn't super aligned with my kind of long-term vision, even though the founder, who's a good friend of mine, and the team was awesome, and the product was really interesting. It was just not something I was too excited about long-term for me. So quit that in January, and I was kind of like trying to figure out what to do. And I was in Brazil at the time. But then I connected. I was in São Paulo, which is the biggest city in Brazil. It's like 23 million people. It's crazy. So I was there in São Paulo, connected with somebody who was doing the program at Antler. So Antler is a VC firm that has locations for this program called a founder residency. And they have locations, they have this program in many, many cities in the world. And so somebody was doing the program in São Paulo. And I talked to this individual, and I was like, this is pretty interesting. Checked it out. They have a cohort starting in Toronto, March 31st. Applied, did some interviews with the folks, the partners, got in, and that brings me to today.
That's pretty cool. Cheers, by the way.
Salud.
I have so many questions.
Yeah.
I have so many questions, but let's start with this. Why go back to startups? It seems like you have a fantastic life consulting, working with these successful startups as consultants, government consulting, living in Latin America for inventors, why go back?
I guess you and I were both one of those people, that we just love pain for some reason, don't we?
I know, right? Unfortunately.
But I mean, jokes aside, of course, there's this, I think once you've been in this kind of game even a little bit of time, you realize like there's a lot of pain. Obviously, you know this very well. It's just, there's nothing else like it, man, right? Like there's...
it's like the adrenaline and...
Yeah, one day you feel like a genius, the next day you feel like a complete idiot. That's the fun of that, is there's something exhilarating about it. And I think more in a real way, there's a framework I'd heard of a while back. I think it was a TED Talk that talked about when you're designing your career, there's kind of 3 things you should try to optimize for that will make you more than happy, more content, right? Like, and satisfied with your career. Happiness is a very positive thing, but I'm looking for more satisfaction and presence than happiness, frankly. Being able to be in the moment more than anything else. And those 3 things in that framework were autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So, that level of satisfaction that you're looking for, generally you're going to get if you have a high amount of autonomy. You have control over, you have ownership. And then mastery, like you get to get better at things. And startups, that's, you know, there's no limit to, you're always going to be kind of an idiot in the startup.
Yeah, you're always gonna make so many obvious mistakes, right?
Exactly, right? I have a friend who says that in a startup, like people outside of the startup world think that it's like playing a sport, that you go from like the basic league to like the A levels and then to the national league to the, you know, you kind of progress that way. And it's like when you're in startups, you actually realize it's nothing like that. It's more like you play baseball, you get good at it, then you have to go learn quantum mechanics, then you have to get good at that, then you have to figure out like some other completely different topic. That's really what startups feel like.
That is so true. Yeah.
Yeah. So the last
Mastery and autonomy, mastery,
and purpose,
purpose.
right? Yeah. So, you know, solving a problem that you care about, there's nothing more exciting than, you know, waking up and thinking about a problem every day. It's not, you know, you kind of wake up giddy when you're excited about your problem, right?
Yeah,
So,
let me tell you something fun. Like I was at some friends this weekend, and it was a Sunday. We had Sunday brunch together, and everybody was going home after, and it was Sunday. Tomorrow's Monday, right? And I was like, everybody looked at me like I'm a little like excited for Monday. It's like I can't believe like you're excited for Monday. So I was like, I don't know how to explain it. It's just it is exciting to
Right.
you know to start the week again, have a meeting with everybody, set goals, like you know tackle problems.
exactly.
It is, yeah, it's nothing like it, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Are there other things for you that really drive you with the startup team? Because you're on your third.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for a while now. I would say on a personal level, it's two things. One, I really enjoy it. Like, I don't think I would have any career satisfaction from something else, to be honest. And I was very lucky to realize this when I was 19. When I was going through school, university, I was doing computer engineering. I randomly saw an ad for like a web developer and I was hired. Like I applied to it, I was hired right there. And I was paid so much, I was making as much as my dad was. And I had this hybrid work life, you know, balance. I would go to school, go work there, you know, on the weekends. And
And this is St. John's.
this is in Iran.
Is Iran?
Yeah, yeah. So there was this consulting firm doing these huge projects for the government.
Cool.
And, you know, for like traffic stops or whatever. And I was programming these weird things for like the city, which felt really good. Like I could see my work on the billboards. Like, yeah, like the impact. I was like, oh my God, that's so amazing. 6 months in, I was bored out of my mind. I could not even go in. And I stopped going in and I stopped answering emails. Like I was very immature, obviously, like don't do this. But I was so bored.
19, immature, what?
Exactly. I was so bored. I couldn't even talk to them. Like I couldn't be like, hey, I can't do this. Like, and I was ashamed, of course, like
Right.
of not wanting to do it. So I was paid. I was very lucky. Like at 19, I was paid well in an area I thought I'm very passionate about, which is software development, and I'm still very passionate about it. It's just that I could definitely not see myself doing that for the next like 30 years as my role, like working on a software, you know. So I was extremely lucky that way to know that okay, I can't do this like as a job, and immediately switch gears to like software entrepreneurship, tech entrepreneurship, because yeah, every day is new, you know, and you never get bored. If anything, you never get bored.
And so you started entrepreneurship in Iran.
Yes, yeah. I had a company actually, which went so poorly. I could write a book about all the mistakes I made there. I lost some friends. I made a lot of mistakes.
Classic.
Every classic mistake. Yeah, a textbook, like textbook startup mistake.
Working with friends too.
Working with friends, working with family, working like so much. Like I can go on about that forever. But I was so young too. So like
it's the perfect time to make this mistake, you know, like
exactly. And then I came to Canada, and I remember this day. I was about finishing my degree in Memorial University in Newfoundland, and I was talking to this person, Chris Gardner is his name, who later started a company, Sequence Bio, to help sequence genome data.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I was talking to him like, yeah, I don't know what to do at this networking event. Like, I don't know what to do. Maybe I want to get an internship after I graduate. And he looked at me, he's like, why are you thinking so small? Like, go do something big. And I was like, huh, like, that's pretty cool.
That's what you need, right? You need that one person who like kind of nudges you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I always remember that as like, yeah, the push that I needed to do 3 startups in Canada and still working on the last 2, yes.
That's awesome.
I have another question. What did you study in school and why did you quit?
Yeah, I studied. So I started off in engineering, and the school I went to, Western, is general engineering first year.
Got it. And then you pick a,
Exactly, pick a stream after the first year. I went into, I did until high school. I was kind of doing quite like did quite well in school without really trying too hard, I would say. I was naturally like, I wouldn't even say like naturally smart, but I was naturally kind of exposed growing up to a lot of these topics around science and math, and excelled with that at math. Mostly, I would say thanks to the context I was coming from, Indian kind of household, Indian upbringing.
is it true the stereotype that you should be an engineer or doctor or lawyer or?
Yeah, and it was funny because I naturally gravitated towards the sciences. Growing up, my parents didn't allow me to have video games, sadly, but they did get me lots of, yeah, I guess pros and cons. I think video games can be pretty useful for kids too, like from certain strategy games and all that. But that's all right. I can play them now, so it's okay. I'm allowed to play them now. I was actually playing some COD on my phone earlier today too. But yeah, like growing up, I was given a lot of like encyclopedias and like a lot of books for my parents to read. And I naturally just found curiosity. My mom's a very curious person. My grandfather's a scientist on my mom's side, and just grew up like learning about how things work and just found it really interesting. Right. And I think a lot of us, who become founders, engineers, I think we have this kind of curiosity. I honestly think every kid does. And some of us are allowed to and given opportunities to explore those curiosities. So grew up just very curious and naturally gravitated towards the sciences and math. But I did grow up in a pretty conservative household. So, I was never allowed to go on sleepovers to my friends' places or, drinking, of course, God forbid, there was none of that. Blasphemy. But yeah, like I grew up in that sort of context, and then my whole perspective was, and I have an older sister, and she was the rebellious one, but I was the one that was like, no, I'm gonna follow the straight edge path, and I'm gonna wait until I get to university, and I want to leave home and go to a different school that's far away from home, so I can live there. And my parents were like, yeah, you got good grades, if that's what you want to do, go for it. So I went to Western University, which is known to be a bit of a party school too. And my dream, my imagination was that going to university would be studying stuff I really find interesting, feeding my curiosities, while at the same time having this amazing group of friends and having this amazing social life. Engineering is not a place where you can really easily sustain a social life. And so I got to school, I got to university, and I was just very quickly, fell behind on my courses. And at the same time, I was just like, this is not what I imagined. It's not really satisfying the thing that I thought it would satisfy. And just, I guess ultimately ended up making these decisions that led to not performing very well in school. And I just kind of lost interest, kind of just couldn't get myself to feel super excited. So I ended up failing the first year calculus for engineering, which is a pretty tough course. And that meant that I was told to, you're not welcome to engineering anymore. And you're allowed to move to a different program based on some of the courses, you did move through. And one of the programs that I was kind of allowed to move to was computer science in the science department. So I ended up moving to that and did 2 years of that. But the entire time I was just unengaged. I didn't know why I was learning this stuff. And especially after that first year experience, I just kind of felt like this is not at all the path that I imagined. And there was an image of me that cracked. I grew up believing I'm this like smart kid. And then suddenly, based on all these external signals, I started to believe, wait a minute, maybe I'm not that intelligent. So that's what happened with my kind of university degree progression that way. And then during those 2 years, I also actually started to, I kind of came across this BBC Changemakers, I think it's called, documentary about Elon Musk.
Cool.
And that documentary I watched over and over again. And I was like, this is cool. This guy's very interesting. And the way Elon Musk kind of thought about first principles, I don't know if he does that so much today, but I think back in the day, you know, I still have a lot of respect, frankly, for the things he's done in the engineering world, of course. And yeah, he was doing like revolutionary things. And he always talked about like, think from first principles, you know, like, and a lot of what he talked about also was in regards to education, wherein like you don't need a degree to go do, you don't need somebody's permission, you don't need a piece of paper to go do things that you want to do.
Yeah.
And I already had some friends that were in the startup world, and that was also and still is the wisdom of the startup world, which is you don't need permission, right? Like don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. That's often a phrase we hear, right? And that really resonated with me. And my dad's an entrepreneur too, so he's kind of also lived with that principle in many ways. So had these hard conversations with my parents eventually and said, look, I want to take a break. I'm not enjoying this. And they were seeing it too. They were like, you're not having a good time. So it's like reluctantly they said, okay, go take a break, go figure out what you want to do. And if it makes sense, come back to school. And so that's what I did. I left school and kind of went on from there.
That's very brave for you and your parents. Like, I haven't heard many stories like that where it goes well, that conversation honestly, going well, you know?
Yeah, honestly, more brave on their part, I would say. Because for me, it was just like the circumstances around me were also pushing me in that direction of like, this school is just it's not resonating. And so it felt very natural to me at that point. And thankfully, I had friends, like I said, in the startup world who were like, this is, you know, it's not uncommon for people to drop out and go pursue things in the startup world.
So you are a university dropout. Where can we invest in the next thing you do, you know? Cool. That's such a fantastic story. I love hearing it. Like you're like I think the role model entrepreneur, like went to school, it's dropped out, you know.
But you know, this is an interesting point, and we were talking about this, like you've got your second startup, Building Together, I think it's called, right?
Get Building.
Get Building. So,
yes, yeah.
Yeah. And I have some pretty dramatic views on education too at this point. It sounds like you do too.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm curious. How do you see it?
I think it's limited to probably tech or maybe more like hands-on stuff, of course, like tech for good or worth, like it's something you can do yourself. Like you don't need a degree, right?
Yeah.
Of course, you don't want to become like, you don't want to go to a doctor who doesn't have certificate, like,
or a civil engineer building a bridge that without
drive on a bridge that you don't know who built this, any qualification. But for software, it seems like it doesn't matter. And I wonder if there's even maybe a reverse correlation, like people that don't go to university, maybe even pursue and do better things. I wonder if there's that. But essentially, I feel like what's happened is that universities, especially talking about computer science or computer engineering, they're selling software development careers, but they're teaching a 4-year degree that's not necessary for that, because that's how they make their money. What you need to be a good software engineer, you can learn in about a year.
Yeah.
And if anybody works at a tech company as an intern or whatever for a year, they understand what I'm saying. Like you go in not knowing anything, a year later, you're the one training everybody else, right? And that's essentially the model we took and built at Get Building.
Right.
It's okay, you have this person who cannot write a line of code. If it was me teaching them how to code, like how would I do it? Not like a program. Yeah. If it was your regular software engineering who works at Tesla decided to teach this person, teach their cousin how to code, how would they do that? They wouldn't sit them in a class. They would sit with them directly and be like, oh, do this, read this material, do that. Now go do these things, come back to me, I'll give you more. So it's more like a mentorship. Yeah, self-paced mentorship model.
Yeah, because a lot of these things, I think they are kind of like a craft. And historically, when you think back to medieval times, et cetera, like a leather smith or like a woodworker, right? Like you didn't learn it in school. You learned it by doing an apprenticeship, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is we call it like it's a simulation of the actual work environment, where in the actual work environment you have a project, somebody who is not you breaks it down to smaller chunks that the team can handle, and you sit in a meeting, they give you the small chunks and give you direction and say go, you come back needing help, they help you go, and it's iteration. You repeat that like 1,000 times and suddenly you're a great software developer.
Yeah.
So we took that model and put it in like a training format. It's like somebody comes and does the same to you. The other thing that, regarding university is that it's highly regulated. It's not that the university, maybe they are, maybe they're not, like these evil corporations that are trying to extract money. It's that they need to do a 4-year degree.
Yeah.
And to do a 4-year degree, if you read the amount of regulation there is, at least in Canada, it's like, it's a book on like how to run a course, on who can teach the course, what content has to be there, how do you grade people.
Right.
So it's a whole system that's built around it that it's too big to disrupt, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me about your experience with your thoughts on education and also BrainStation.
Yeah. It's funny, I smile because there's lately I've come across this philosophy, especially about children, and education for children. And I've had some dramatic changes in my perspective on how to kind of raise children, not just in education that's post-secondary, but I mean like right from childhood. But yeah, let me start with BrainStation. So BrainStation was awesome. It was actually the same friend who kind of encouraged me. He was like, hey, look, if you want to take a break, go see what's happening in the world. He was actually one of the co-founders of BrainStation.
Oh, okay, cool. So did you do that right after quitting school?
No, so I did that after I spent a year at this company called Foodora, right?
Oh, okay.
So I was in the sales team there. I was a third employee. This was a European, basically, startup that had raised $120 million, and they were expanding to North America for the first time, and they were launching in Toronto. And I was just, aggressively looking for jobs, and I was basically just harassing the hiring manager over and over again, and professionally harassing, like with those nice words, to whom it may concern. But I was really following up with him, and he was working on launching one business from the same VC, but they kind of canceled launching that, and he was like, "Hey, reach out to me again in a few weeks. We might be rolling out launching a different business." So that was Foodora, and yeah, I followed up, and he eventually gave me an opportunity. I bombed my first interview, by the way, and then what I did was I went home, and after I knew I bombed the first interview, and I went home and I basically just spent 3 hours thinking about the questions he'd asked me in the interview that I bombed, and writing down in a document how I would re-answer those questions. Nice. And then sent him that document, and that's how he was like, "I like your persistence," and ended up hiring me. So that was amazing.
That is so smart. Like, how did you come up with that idea? Like, yourself? Like,
I mean, that's the main thing I knew, and especially for a sales role, all that matters is persistence.
Yeah, the attitude. Yeah.
Yeah, the attitude, exactly, right? So that's what I kind of understood. I was like, I know that I did not do well. I could see from his face during the interview. It's like, this guy seemed okay on the phone, but in person, he's not cutting it. And I could tell that's how he was feeling. But then I basically realized, okay, I need to keep trying. And so what he liked was coachability, he said. He told me after. He's still a good friend of mine, thankfully, to this day. But yeah, by the way, that was an amazing experience. I think for a lot of folks, if you're not, on the coding side of things, if your brain really doesn't kind of work there, sales, if you are a people person, I think sales is an amazing kind of a career path to even at least start on, because you're always, as you know, right? Like in anything in life, you're always selling.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, coming back to BrainStation after a year in that role, learned a ton. And while we were launching this business in Toronto, we were figuring out whether or not to like launch the delivery operations internally or to acquire a company. And I wasn't really privy to those conversations, but the managing directors and such, they ended up acquiring a company from Toronto called Hurrier. And this was a bootstrap business. And they had in that business, so that team got acquired and merged into our team. And in that team, there was a couple of software developers. And so me being the business development associate, business development rep, BDR, I was sat right beside the engineers. And I would just like bother them constantly. I was like, hey, teach me this, teach me that. And they were both so kind that they were like, yeah, happy to kind of show me what they were doing. And I learned a little bit of coding, right? So I'd learned some data structures, algorithms. I'd been playing with jQuery on the side, doing Code Academy online over the last couple of years prior to that. And but I didn't really have the skills fully. So I was just like fascinated by the fact that you can do this and a product that people can use, people can interact and solve their problems with, can be created just by hitting some keys on a keyboard. And it's fascinating. It's magical, right? And we've all had that.
It's like magic. Yeah,
exactly, right? Like I'm sure that's obviously what you felt too. Yeah. So did that got excited by that and realized I want to go make things. I don't just want to sell the things. I want to make things too. So I ended up quitting that job to do a coding boot camp, a 10-week coding boot camp at BrainStation. And that's how I learned, a little bit of React. Oh, no, actually, sorry, Angular at this time.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Oh, no, indeed. Learned some Angular, learned some Node, I believe, as well, and SQL, P-SQL. And then away we go. So while I was at the coding boot camp, near the end, they had some events where a startup came by called Rover. It was an Airbnb for parking startup. And so again, same thing, just talked to one of the speakers was at this event. It was a panel discussion. One of the speakers was one of the co-founders of Rover. So I thought, that's cool. Let me go talk to this guy. So kept bugging him. Yeah. And he was like, yeah, come by. And so again, the persistence paid off. They hired me as a junior software developer. And so that's the kind of path I took to learn coding. And, as we all know, like from there, I learned React by doing tutorials online, those 2-hour videos with usually an Indian guy with a big accent. Yeah, to-do list, exactly, to-do list, dating app, clone, all those clone apps, you build. Did that, and that's how I continue to kind of slowly build my software development skills.
Okay, so I would love to hear your radical thoughts on education then.
I'm glad you asked. I was just thinking about that. So you've probably heard of Naval Ravikant?
Yes.
Yeah.
I saw you retweet him a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I creeped on all your social medias as part of prepping for this. Yes.
Awesome. And are you familiar a little bit about his kind of?
Yeah, I've read his tweets, his how to make money, leveraging things that scale, media, software. I forgot the other one, investing.
Yeah. So he's quite popular for 2 or 3 categories of things. And so you kind of hit on 2 of them, which is tech, investing, money, startups. That realm, I guess. But then the other thing he's quite kind of famous for is he's often called the angel philosopher. And so he's the angel investor and seed investor in a lot of early stage startups, but he's also quite philosophical. And that's the side of him that I find more interesting. There's actually a 2-hour podcast with him and Shane Parrish from the Knowledge Project, which is like a bit of a life-changing podcast for me. Highly impactful for me. And so he's also one of those people that's just a bit of a radical thinker. He's super contrarian in many ways. So
nice.
Yeah,
I'll start listening.
Yeah. So it's funny because there's a podcast recently I heard from with him on that podcast by Tim Ferriss. Mm-hmm. So it was a Tim Ferriss podcast with him and a guy named Aaron Stuppel. And so on that pod, Aaron Stuppel and Naval both have kids, and they're presenting their philosophy on parenting, which they learned from a guy named David Deutsch, who's also a philosopher and just generalist in many ways. So they're really talking about, the podcast is called how to raise a sovereign child, a quite independent child, right? And I jokingly tweeted that the podcast should be called "How to Raise a Kid Who Can't Hate You," because they have this pretty radical perspective on parenting, which is basically, what if you put zero rules on your kids? Most parents have some sort of rules like, oh, you got to be in bed by 8, you got to eat your broccoli, you got to brush your teeth, all these things. And both these individuals do not have any rules for their kids. So if their kid does not want to brush their teeth, that's fine. If their kid does not want to eat their dinner, that's also okay. If their kid wants to be on their iPad for 8 hours, that's all right. So it's pretty radical, and their kids are, I think both their kids are probably around the teens, or a little bit younger, a little bit older. And the other thing they've done is they're both homeschooling their kids. In which, in the case of Aaron, in Aaron's case, there's basically no minimal schooling happening apparently. I know Naval's case a bit more in that he basically has two things that he enforces. He has a few more rules than Aaron does for his kids. His two rules are, every day you got to do 1 hour of math and 1 hour of literacy, reading. And you can choose what you want to read, by the way. And that's pretty much it. After you're done that, you can be on your iPad for 6 hours if you want. That's fine with him. And so the more I listened to this podcast and looked into this philosophy, it's called TCS, Taking Children Seriously. So treating children not as these subhumans that are not ready to make their own decisions, but rather treating them as like just as rational or almost just as rational as adults. Because arguably most adults, including myself, not very rational. So it's a philosophy I found really interesting, and it really resonated because I'd also had an opportunity to learn a lot about homeschooling with my last startup, which was initially called Financy and then pivoted into being called Fam School. And yeah, I find this philosophy very interesting of, again, just not building rules for kids, but rather building knowledge. So for example, again, brushing your teeth, the way they approach it is they're not going to set a rule, but rather they're going to create knowledge for their kids. So if the kid doesn't want to brush their teeth, that's okay. In the morning, what they'll do is instead have a discussion with the child. It's like, hey, I know you didn't brush your teeth. By the way, smell your breath. Like, how does it smell? Does it feel okay? Like, how do you feel about that? And then they'll say, hey, come smell my breath. You see, mine it smells a little different, right? It doesn't smell bad. And so this philosophy of not kind of setting strict, stringent rules on kids, I find very interesting and refreshing, especially because I grew up in a context of fairly conservative kind of parents.
Interesting.
So I think even with education, that's affected my thinking, wherein I've always believed that everyone naturally is pretty curious. I do believe that. And I think certain rule-based kind of thinking can almost beat out the curiosity that naturally emerges. And so if I'm to have kids, I think I'd like to kind of have a similar approach. And I really like the idea of homeschooling because, again, the way Naval puts it is like with traditional schooling, when you talk to parents, it's like, oh, I gotta pick up the kid at 3 p.m. I gotta run. I gotta get this kid to school. And it's like, oh, let's do this vacation. Oh, we can't. We gotta take the kid at school, So me already living this kind of nomadic lifestyle, I don't want to stop that. And I would love to be able to experience that with my family if I have one day, is being able to take them to different parts of the world and explore together. So yeah, pretty radical. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know about kids. Like, I have no idea. I don't have kids, and I haven't been around kids actually. Strangely, like I was always the youngest person in any room, even with my family and cousins and everybody. So I don't know, but I totally agree when we're talking about like high school. After high school, like it's kind of strange to me where, for example, in university years, they're like, here's your dorm, here's your food. It's like sort of babying like too much.
Yeah.
It feels like just a additional daycare sort of, versus like, well, what do you like to do? What do you like to study?
Yeah.
And that was my You know where the idea of Get Building came from? Now, it was my co-founder who originally had the idea, but we actually were thinking about it very separately in different terms. I was thinking about it in terms of Hogwarts. So I read Hogwarts when I was, I read Hogwarts when I was like, I don't know, middle school or something like that. And I was like, this is the dream school. You go there, you can do anything. There's all sorts of adventure and danger that you can get involved. And you can be as successful as Harry Potter, who goes to the world and defeats the demon, or you could be like, you know, just any other student. Like essentially there's like room to make a lot of mistakes and to do a lot of your own adventures, which I felt like, oh, I wish software development training was like that. You know, why don't we have, why are not people who are interested in hacking, like learning how to hack people?
Yeah.
Like they don't teach that in school. And that's probably the most interesting topic.
Yeah.
Why don't they teach people how to make games? That's probably the first or second most interesting topic to most people, right?
Yeah.
So why are they not teaching coding through these means,
Yeah.
you know, versus like curriculum based? And that's a whole conversation. But yeah, totally see that. It's like giving more autonomy to the person to pursue their own interests and curiosities.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And game development, I think, is pretty interesting. Have you done some game development too?
Of course, yeah. I think anybody who's done any software development sort of dabbles it. It's just so fun. Yeah.
And game development, it's hard, right? Game development is really hard. There's so many layers to it, right? Like you want to construct, if you're doing especially something with a bit of a storyline, right? Like that aspect, and how do you bring out the narrative of the storyline through your game, through the visuals, through the actual technical, all the way down to the code, right? It's really tough. And I think it's really interesting. Game development is fascinating. I didn't grow up playing games, like I said, but it's for Financy, which was the last startup, the first version, first pre-pivot of the last startup. We delved somewhat deeply into game design too, and realized just how many layers of how many dimensions that you kind of have to work with. Yeah, I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, that's a good pivot, I think, to your startup story. So you work at these companies. I would love to know who convinces you to, or how you're convinced to start your first startup, EverySay.
Yeah.
And the idea is pretty unique. Not many people try to connect people with government. You know, that's pretty unique.
Don't do it. It's not.
Don't touch government.
I think it's one of those things. So EverySay was really inspired by. It's funny. I didn't know what was inspiring me until I was really in the thick of it, the value of pain, and I did some introspection and I realized like, oh, this is what's driving me. I thought, you know, what was initially at the surface, what was driving me was, there's got to be, ultimately, we've all thought about this, that like, there should be a better way to interface with government. Government should just needs to improve, right? And so I thought, okay, you know, I know a little bit of coding at this point. This was 2017, 2017 or so, and I was already playing with this concept of like, okay, what if I could, you know, I was on Tinder at the time, and I was like, what if I could do the same thing with bills in government? What if I could swipe right on the ones I like and swipe left on the ones I dislike? And so
Sounds fantastic.
right?
Like, where is it?
And like a lot of bad ideas, it sounds great. So I found this API that had all the federal level bills that were being discussed. Turns out the bills that are being discussed, the way they're written, is super boring. So, you know, the first kind of hurdle. But then, you know, when you get past all that, and what we did with EverySay was, I ended up finding some folks that were in the policy world, brought them kind of together. I was on the technical side, and we built out this initial product called EverySay. We focused on the municipal level, so City of Toronto's, City Hall discussions and executive committees about housing, policing, taxes, etc. So we started to pull together what was being discussed there. And some of the policy folks on the team, they were kind of explaining in simpler terms what was being discussed. And then the interface was around being able to see the different issues. Then when you clicked on it, you would see the description, and then you would see the sub-policies within it. And you could say you agree or disagree with the sub-policies. And so we collected a few thousand Torontonians' opinions on different issues. We went to city council and presented these findings too. But with politics and government, in a lot of these issues, there's a problem known as tragedy of the commons. So everyone cares a little bit, but almost nobody cares a lot. And typically, to move the needle on any issue, you need at least a meaningful number of people who care a lot about that issue.
Got it.
Right? And especially in a country like Canada, and especially pre-pandemic, I think during the pandemic it was a little different, but pre-pandemic, things were, relatively and on a global scale, quite good. And so it's hard to find a meaningful number of people that really care about certain issues. Housing was one of them, and so we were seeing a bit of traction there. But after spending 8 months on that kind of project, we built something, we got some traction, but there was no business model. And that was like my kind of first mistake of like trying to build something without knowing where the money's going to come from and without really putting effort into that. I was a little bit too idealistic.
And that was without VC.
Without VC. It was I had about $12,000 saved from my job. I was working for a blockchain development agency and I had $12K kind of saved there. And I was like, let's put all this into this and try to build it. And so even tried to bring like what we built, tried to bring the platform to community engagement folks at different municipalities. So we went to Oakville, we went to Innisfil, which is a pretty innovative city in Ontario. We met with folks in these different teams and they were interested, but they were like, there's nothing radically exciting and different here. So that didn't end up working. But by then, within about 8-9 months of trying that, I'd made some connections with nonprofits in the space, advocacy groups, even an elected rep, MPP, actually for this area. Chris Glover, shout out Chris Glover, is an awesome guy. And he was like, hey, yeah, Yash, like I'd love to use this product to like engage my constituents, my 125,000 constituents in the Spadina-Fort York area. And so we're like, great, like we've got an MPP who's on board. Let's build this thing for him and let's see if we can roll it out in his constituency. And so right when we were preparing to roll it out, he wanted to do this consultation digitally around climate policy for his constituents. And he was right, like a few weeks before we were about to roll it out with him, the pandemic hit.
Oh no.
Yeah. So, everything gets shelved, of course, at that time, right?
Yeah.
But he did circle back to me saying, hey, Yash, like we were going to do this town hall in person. We were going to engage people. We do these regular in-person town halls, but we can't meet in person anymore. So can you help me figure that out? I want to do these virtual events. And so ended up pivoting into building a virtual events platform. So basically hooked up Zoom with YouTube Live, put it into a nice front-end interface, use Firebase real-time database to like change the interface to start the event at the right time. So it would start showing the feed at the right time. People could sign up prior to the start. And then during the event, it would show a live video feed. There was a live like chat that had approval from admin. Built all this stuff out. And then ended up finding this awesome co-founder in the process too. She'd worked for Wealthsimple, so she had some great connections in the VC world. And so we went out and pitched this thing like, hey, look, we've got a couple of paying customers as well by then. We had a couple of nonprofits that I was talking to that were like, again, like we weren't interested in your earlier product, Yash, but like this virtual events thing we need. So ended up picking up a couple of paying customers and then went to VCs and they're like, so you got SurveyMonkey meets Zoom with a little bit of front end. It's like, so you want to take on $2 billion companies. What's your moat? And very quickly realized there was no real business there.
Do you think they were correct though?
I think they were correct.
Yeah? Okay.
I think in that case,
Because you could always say that about anything. It's like,
That's
what's
true.
your moat?
That's true. Yeah. I think in that case, they had some points, but it's funny because around that time, a platform called Luma came out, which is a very famous, it's still an extremely popular platform. It's grown a lot. It's for like virtual event sign up.
Got it.
Platform. But, we looked at their offering and realized like, I was not, you're him, but I was not that guy. I'm not the most talented software developer. I'm more of a generalist. And on our team, my co-founder, Richa, like she was more of a business person as well. So we didn't really have the kind of skill set to really take on that problem and really build the kind of market share I think that we needed.
Got it.
So yeah, I think for us, maybe you're right though. Maybe in my head, the VCs were correct, but I think you're right to question that. Yeah, so that's kind of what happened that time. So we end up very quickly pivoting away from that and kind of just leaving. My co-founder at the time, she realized like she wanted to do other things after a year and a half of us trying this as well. But again, by then I had all these connections in the space, and these nonprofits, advocacy groups, et cetera, many of whom had decent budgets. They were kind of coming to me and saying, "Hey, Yash, like this stuff's cool, but like, can you help us with marketing? Can you help us with setting up our project management tooling?" Right? So I was like, okay, let me just pause this stuff that's not working. Let me just do some consulting work and make a little bit of money. So I ended up doing that for about a year. In the process, I ended up working with a lobbying firm as well. So that was a really cool project. Learned a lot about how media monitoring specifically works, policy media monitoring, which is something I find very interesting still. And ended up working with a public consultation firm. So there's a firm that gets hired by Metrolinx, that gets hired by the Ontario government. They've had, I think, well over 150 public sector clients over the last 15 years, and they were amazing partners. We might actually do another project with them next year, most likely, it looks like. So I ended up doing that kind of stuff. And around that time, the lobbying firm that I was kind of doing some consulting firm with, there was some connections there through whom I ended up connecting with an investor out in BC. So one of the people on that team kind of came to me and said, "Hey, look, I know this guy who's made a bunch of money in finance, and he's based out in BC, and yeah, like he's looking to play in the startup game. And I don't know anybody else who's in the startup world, but Yash, like it seems like you've done some startup stuff. Do you want to talk to him?" And ended up connecting with this individual. He was thinking he would hire me as a service provider to build out a product idea that he had. And his idea was around like stock market, virtual stock market, basically, and a stock education platform. And I told him, look, we could do that, but I really don't think this is a great idea because, there's a million of these things, first of all. And I think we've kind of missed the boat on this concept. And he very quickly also agreed. It's like, yeah, I think you're probably right. I said, give me a little bit of time. Let me go create a bit of a plan as to how I think we should explore. And also, by the way, like, I'm not really looking to, be a consultant and build this out for you. I don't want to sit on the other side of the table as you, but I want to sit on the same side of the table. I want to be your partner. So I want some upside in this business. Let's build together. Initially, he was hesitant, but the more we talked over a couple months, he was like, yeah, you know what? This makes sense. And I said all the things to him, like, look, when, stuff is hitting the fan and things are not working at 2 a.m., you don't want me to be thinking about my billables to you. You want me to think about the 10-year vision of this business, right? And you want me to be working hard and my team to be working hard. And so that resonated with him. He said, okay, great. Let's create a cap table that makes sense. It did not make sense, the cap table we designed. It was extremely unorthodox. And again, like this was an investor that found me rather than me building an initial business and then going to him.
So he was in favor of him? Or
yeah. So the way it was structured was basically 25% equity for me and my team, but non-diluting ever.
Okay.
Depending on how you look at it, good or bad.
Could be good.
Right. So it was but again, like any sophisticated VC especially wouldn't touch, you're not going to touch that with a 30-foot pole. There's no way.
Yeah.
Right. So I figured, okay, I've tried to go back and forth with this guy and he's a pretty, thoughtful, intelligent guy, but he's just not familiar with the startup world. So I thought, let's get started. He was set on that. He thought that was kind of the, after negotiations, he was like, this is it for me. Like, Yash, if you want to do this, this is how I want to do it. I thought, okay, if this is the end of the line of that conversation, let's get started. Hopefully we can make this work. And once this thing starts to fly, this business, then I'm sure he'll be able to see that to bring in other investors, we'll probably need to reorganize the cap table.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, okay, let's take this opportunity. Let's try it. So again, like super unorthodox. And again, like the kind of thing where the other perspective, the other aspect was that there was no it wasn't a traditional fundraise where you get that entire, amount in your bank account and you can make the decision. You can plan out, you can do your financial planning the way you need to. Instead, we were getting chunks of money, 20, 30, 40K at a time. And that's really hard to do financial planning that way, especially when your investor is a busy guy and sometimes he gets a little bit too busy to send you the wire transfers for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time.
We got bills.
Exactly, right? And that's where a line of credit has to come in sometimes, and that's what I had to do. Don't do that.
Don't do a personal line of credit for your business.
Especially when you own a minority share in it, right? That was the journey. There's so many little parts of that, we could dive into, and it was a really fun journey. Got to work with a lot of really cool people, and my favorite part, frankly, was by the end of that journey, after trying to work with folks in Canada, US, etc., building team. Eventually, by then I was already living in Latin America, and that was helping me cut my expenses as well. I ended up essentially hiring from Latin America eventually, and ended up hiring 2 especially awesome people by the end of the kind of team. And frankly, I think we had this kind of love for each other that was awesome, because there was an extremely high amount of trust, extremely high amount of competency, an amazing developer out of northern Brazil, an amazing designer and user researcher out of Buenos Aires, Argentina. And we just had this cohesion. We had this ability to kind of understand users, understand users, and understand the problem space slowly but surely, a bit more, and then come up with experiments, conceive of these experiments, design the kind of feature sets that we're experimenting with, put it out very quickly, and get user feedback. So we were iterating pretty quickly for the last, I would say, year of building that business. And after 6 months with that team on that initial kind of financial literacy app for kids, where I learned a lot about education and learned a lot about homeschoolers, because that was the group that resonated most with our product. After that, we pivoted into education as a whole, and education empowered by AI. So we built something that was ultimately for schools, for teachers to be able to build assignments that were tailored to each individual student's interest. So speaking of Harry Potter earlier, you could put in Harry Potter for individual students. So the same lesson would be tailored using Harry Potter as a theme for one kid if they were interested in that, Minecraft for another kid if that's what that kid liked, and so forth, right? Keeping the same concepts, And so that's what we ended up building. We got our first customer eventually by doing a bunch of just hacky business development, cold calling the crap out of private schools. You're not going to sell to public schools, obviously. Early on, the sales cycle is too long. And we got our first paying customer in the form of an international school in Atlanta, in Georgia, in the US. And that was just, a few weeks before we ran out of money.
Oh, no. How did you run out of money?
As the investor, the divorce. It was the...
That is so strange, things out of your control, right?
Yeah.
Do you want a refill?
Sure.
So, what's your bad advice for founders? Things you're afraid to say maybe out loud, but what you want to say to people that, hey, listen.
Yeah. It's funny because I don't know about you, but I think I've talked to a lot of folks, and with the program I'm in right now called Antler, which is all about bringing together founders and helping them in creating companies. And I've found an individual there, awesome guy, with whom we're pretty much locked in, and we're trying to build something together. We are locked in now, actually, and we're trying to build together. And he was also saying this thing, which many of my friends have said, that a lot of us were kind of inspired back in 2010 by a movie called The Social Network.
The lies, yeah.
Right, and we were all, I think. And even to this day, there's this kind of romanticization of entrepreneurship. And I think that's great. There's an aspect of that that's valuable. But at this point, I've always started to say to people like, are you thinking about it? Like when they say it's like, oh yeah, like I'm thinking about doing this, like don't do it, you know? And like the point of saying that is not so much to say like it's meant to be stark, because the point is really, really understand what you're taking on and really understand what you might be romanticizing and what you might be misunderstanding, you know? And entrepreneurship obviously has a million forms to it. You know, you can go start a restaurant or you can try to start the next Instagram. You know, these are all forms of entrepreneurship. Or you can even do entrepreneurship within a big company, right? That's a thing that exists today and has for a little while now, where there are entrepreneurship, I guess. I don't know if that's the right term, but you can be entrepreneurial within a big organization too. So these are all forms of entrepreneurship. And I think entrepreneurship, a big part of it is creating something from scratch, having autonomy, having, freedom to be able to explore and do something that isn't being done right now. But I think it's really about understanding what you're undertaking, because the startup journey is, yes, it's fun, but at the same time, it will cost you, and not just money. I think, you know, you take on financial debt sometimes you take on technical debt in startups. Of course, we know about that term. But the thing that people don't often know about is the health debt you can end up taking on, the psychological debt you can end up taking on. After my last startup, ran out of money, we just hit monetization and we were running out of money. And that was one of the most painful things. And I'm one of those people that if I'm going to hire somebody, I will care deeply, deeply about them. I will not hire them unless I enjoy working with them, unless I respect them as a person and like them as a person. And if I'm hiring them, you know, it's a responsibility to me that I take extremely seriously. Like, you know, I'm sure you do too, and you know, most founders do. And so there's a cost to that. There's a psychological cost to that, and it should not be taken lightly. And so, you know, for me, what that meant was when the startup was dying, I was going through some significant psychological kind of challenges, I would say. I went through multiple panic attacks and just developed certain mental habits that were very painful, and I've had to work on kind of getting rid of some of those, almost, you know, a little bit of PTSD from that time period of things just, you know, not working out, right? So, you know, I'm sure you've got kind of your battle scars.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right.
How do you deal with that anxiety, that pressure, like that builds up? Especially, I think, especially in this day and age, I feel that right now with AI. Like, I think in the last 6 months, all the like B2B SaaS founders, I'm a B2B SaaS founder, everybody's like, what? Is it all going away? Like, what's going to happen? Like, what advice do you have to people who are feeling that pressure, that anxiety, that panic attack sort of settling in?
That's interesting. I mean, I think I'm still trying to get to grasp of that, but for me, it was frankly a lot of philosophical and spiritual exploration, of trying to understand why it is I'm pursuing the thing I'm pursuing. For example, with EverySay, the reason I realized I'm pursuing it is because I grew up with stories of a grandfather who was a freedom fighter in India.
Wow.
There was a revolution in India 70, 80 years ago now, I guess, where the British Empire was kicked out by the Indian populace. And my grandfather, in his city of Agra, was one of the people. He was a journalist prior to that, and he was extremely politically motivated. And so he was in front of those marches. In fact, he was one of the leaders in that city, and went to jail because they would jail the leaders, and went to jail multiple times in those protests against the British Empire. And so, you know, those were the stories that I grew up with, and I realized eventually, like, that's the inner kind of thing that I'm trying to satisfy. I'm trying to satisfy having a similar journey that's similarly meaningful. And so I guess what I mean to say is, like, you want to really know what's driving you, what's your motivation ultimately. And, you know, I think it's I think it's valuable to find an inner peace at some level, but there's a bit of a paradox because if you find that inner peace, you might stop pursuing the startup.
Why are you doing the startup?
Exactly. So, but I think aside from that inner journey, which I think is supremely important, you got to understand like what does happiness mean to you. And for me, the word happiness no longer is about happiness. It's actually about contentment. It's about being able to be in this moment without desiring something to be different, without desiring, without having regret for the past, without having anxiety for the future. The more I can be in this moment, the more I can play, right? That's what I'm realize is what I'm actually looking for. And for me, unfortunately, at this point, fortunately or unfortunately, there's nothing else that really satisfies that. There's nothing that scratches that itch. But at this point, I'm more careful than ever about not taking on too much financial debt, mental health debt, physical health debt, and any of those things, right? So more than ever, I'm very careful. Even with this startup, I'm very careful about, okay, how do I ensure I don't end up in that same situation? And so I think that means taking care of those things, right? Like taking care of your physical health, your mental health, your spiritual health, whatever those things are that are important to you, your financial health, right? So I think that's what I've come to realize. Like I can't let those tanks get down to zero or negative in some cases, right? So taking on a line of credit is negative, of course. So yeah, I think those are the things for me. I'm curious about your journey. What are the, you've got those battle scars too, so.
Sorry.
Yes, to battle scars from startups to.
Yeah, oh, man. I have so many. I don't know which one to tell you. The one I remember when you say like physical health and mental health debt, I remember my first company when that wrapped up. So I was,
That's the one you raised money for.
yeah, so I was politely fired by the team there.
You were invited to leave.
Yeah, I was invited to leave. It was time. It was like, it was not working out between me and the rest of the team there.
Right.
And I was like, it was a great thing that happened to me actually, because I was like, oh man, I don't have my government health card. I haven't had it for like 5 years. I was like, I didn't even spend the time to go get my health card.
Right.
I didn't have a family doctor.
Wow.
I hadn't gone to the gym. I hadn't read a book. So for the following weeks, I would just go to the gym, read some books, like run a little. And then somebody saw me a few weeks later and he was like, you look so good. Like, I was like, it's like the pressure has lifted off. So
Right.
it's absolutely.
Was it that quick? Was it that immediate for you, the transition?
Yeah, it was like literally like I was working on my second company a month after. And it was literally 2-3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just, I think it was visible physically that I'm under immense pressure. I'm not taking care of myself. Sleep's not good. Food's not good. No exercise, right? So I remember then watching this video from Simon Sinek. He's very famous for the why, how, what.
Exactly.
But the one I really love, one of his more recent works is The Infinite Game. And it's about that, hey, this thing you're doing, whether it's a career or whether it's a startup, it's not like for the next 5 years. It's, do it in an infinite way. You're in it forever, right? So then I really built my second company based on that thesis, is that I want it to be in a way that I would be happy to work there for 50 years.
Right.
So, and I have my friend has this great advice, Jan, who was the first guest, the first ever guest on this podcast, actually, Jan Mertlik. And the episode, the bad advice is growth at human pace. And his advice is like, well, build the type of company where you would be happy working in.
That's awesome.
You're going to work in it, right? So
I like that.
Hopefully for a very long time. And that really resonated.
Yeah.
So And part of that means that, yeah, you're taking care of yourself, you're happy personally, whether it's your family, friends, relationships, whatever that is. So yeah, definitely had a lot of learnings from that. But still, I think in my last company with notification API, because it's more like B2B SaaS and we're like competing head on with like the likes of AWS and Resend and Twilio, like these huge companies, there's that still that immense pressure. And I find myself a lot of times, I do find myself sort of like locked in, like in a negative way, like emotionally, like too much. And I have to remind myself that, yeah, it's just, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a company.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're probably not gonna remember most of it in your deathbed, you know? You don't really care at that time. You know?
It's not too serious.
Yeah,
Nothing
it's
is
not
too serious.
so serious.
Yeah.
It's a business transaction at the end of the day, you know? You're building a service for somebody who's paying for it, you know?
Yeah. Sometimes you need to step back, right? Like when you're this, I have a friend who often says this, like when you're this close to a problem, it's the only thing you see. But when you step away, you realize it's actually not that big. It's much smaller than you think. But when you're this close, you can't see anything else.
Yeah, yeah. And then, yeah, there's that paradox. I love that you mentioned that. I feel like most people don't realize that until they're in it. Is that if you take it too easy, then you look at all these founders who are like betting their lives on it, and that kind of gives you anxiety.
Yeah.
And then if you take it too seriously, then you have that pressure on your personal, you know, self.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there is essentially two theses. One is that this is a rocket ship that needs to leave Earth, like reach escape velocity. I read that, you know, Scott Stevenson mentioned that. It needs to reach escape velocity, and you need to burn, you know, a lot for that.
Yeah.
And I think the other philosophy is that it's not, maybe it's a marathon, you know, you just need to sustain. Now, I don't know which one's more correct, like hopefully both, but
And you don't know. You don't know in the process when you're doing it. You don't know. You can only find out at the end of the journey.
yeah. Yeah, but you're absolutely right that there's a price to it.
Yeah.
There's a mental, even if you don't realize it in your 20s, you know, there's a price. There's a mental and physical health price to it. I joked, like, I was so thin. You're not gonna believe it. I was so thin. People would stop me on the road and be like, you gotta exercise, literally.
Yeah.
People would be like,
Do you need a sandwich?
you need to exercise, like you're too thin. And as soon as I started my first startup, like I gained like 20 kg, like easy. So anybody who thinks there is no price, they're wrong. There is a price. It's very interesting. So you think entrepreneurship, not for everybody. Who is it for?
Who is it for? It's funny because a lot of the entrepreneurs that have done quite well, they've usually gone through something in their childhood that was tough.
I know.
And, you know, I've gone through a few tough things for sure, and most of us have. But unfortunately, my parents loved me a lot.
To build a conglomerate.
I don't think I'm going to be the guy that builds the billion-dollar company.
I heard it so much these days that I'm very happy, by the way, that successful people are kind of starting to mention it very publicly, that you kind of need to be a psychopath to build those type of extremely successful businesses. And you see that in, you know, they write these books about these founders, whoever it is.
I mean, look at Elon.
Some crazy stuff.
He's got a crazy, his child is insane. Right?
Bill Gates, Steve Jobs. Like
Steve Jobs is adopted. You know, there's a lot of these folks that,
Yeah, so you kind of like, you wonder, like, if you have so much pain to, you know, go and, I don't know, like prove
I was going to yell at my parents the other day. I was like, why couldn't you fuck me up a little bit? Why couldn't you mess me up a little bit?
That's why I haven't built the billion-dollar business yet.
So what's your bad advice? Have you covered that on the podcast already?
I have so many, I don't know. I think mine would be along the lines of those infinite game. that
Is this in relation to that book, Finite versus Infinite Games? Is this a similar concept?
I don't know. No. So Simon Sinek has a book called Infinite Game, and it's about this idea. I don't think it's related too much to finance at all. No.
No, not finance. Sorry. There's a book called Finite versus Infinite Games.
Oh yeah, I think it's definitely based on that.
Gotcha.
It's not from Simon Sinek. Is it the same one?
He might have a similar take, because that book, Finite versus Infinite Games, is really about, it's a similar concept, which is like an example of playing football, soccer.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you're playing that game, the finite way to play it is to play it so you can win, and then you don't really want to play it more. You just want to tell people you won.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same as like, I want to be rich so I can tell people I'm rich.
Exactly.
That's the finite way of playing it, and may not be super exciting in the long term, actually. The infinite way of playing football, soccer, is to basically play in a way where it's like, I don't care who wins, I just want to play. And I don't care if more people, in fact, I want more people to play. If somebody's better than me, I want them to come play so we can play together and have a good time. You know, it's not about just me winning so I can tell people I won, but it's about playing.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that concept to me resonates as well quite a
I'm
bit.
pretty sure it's based on that book. Like the idea of this book is based on that book. And it's really about, if you're starting a company, what can you do to survive? And same with your career, same with your loved ones, even in your personal relationships. What can you do to sustain that for like 100 years? You know,
Right.
it's an infinite game. And if you look at anything that's valuable in life, like love, friendship, whatever, these are infinite games. You don't think about, am I a good friend today? I'm not a good friend tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like, whereas in business, we think about, you know, how much money did we make this year? Oh, this year was a good year. Next year was, you know, or last year was not a good year. It's to encourage people to think in those terms of like, it's not about this year or the next year. It's about, are you doing things to sustain you for the next 100 years? And I think that I really love the example
That's awesome.
that's brought on. It's the example of this Japanese camera company. I don't remember which one, like the film companies. If you remember those,
Kodak?
maybe it was Kodak, yeah. And it's that they would create these films, and they had the patent to digital cameras
That's Kodak, yeah.
a decade early.
And they tried to kill it.
They patented it, didn't work on it. It's so mind-blowing.
Yeah.
They could have had digital cameras.
CD.
Yeah.
Chip.
Now we're recording on a Sony, you know. They decided to kill it because it would kill the film business, right?
Yeah.
So they were not thinking infinite. They were thinking about that year or the next year, you know.
Exactly.
They were thinking too
The next quarter's earnings report.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be my bad advice is whatever we're trying to do, we're trying to do it in an infinite way where it's like, is this a decision that would help us 10 years from now, you know, 50 years, or it's in line with essentially the essence of who we are, not what we're doing today, you know?
Yeah.
But it's very hard. Like you have to balance that with the realities of the world.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. That's brilliant. I think that's a very meaningful perspective, I think, and a deep perspective that, I think, you know, especially in entrepreneurship, the finite game is, I want to raise a lot of money so I can tell people I raised a lot of money and people can celebrate that. But the infinite game is, I want to build something that's meaningful for people and improves their lives. And that's not a journey that ends. That's an endless journey. That's a 100-year journey.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about any of these really successful companies like Apple or Microsoft or Amazon or whatever, they were not 10-year companies.
Yeah.
They were not like, oh, raise Series A, B, become public, exit, the founder exited. Like the founders were part of the companies forever, for their lifetime, sort of, you know. I hear Jeff Bezos is back in Amazon or something.
Really?
I heard something. I don't know. He's back into something. Like he had left, but then he's back into something. But yeah, so if you think about any of these companies, Google, the founders, you know, are still very involved. If you think your startup is a 10-year business, you're probably wrong. You know, if it goes well, it's
And
at
most
least
entrepreneurs don't think of it as even a 10-year. They think of it as like, oh, I'll make something quick, sell it in 2-3 years.
Yeah.
You know?
Unfortunately, that's the negative of those movies and those romanticizing, like,
Yeah.
oh, this kid in the college dorm room, you know, and building the software, now it's successful.
Yeah.
Except that he's still at that business. He's still the CEO of the
Exactly.
of Facebook.
Yeah.
How many years it's been? Like 20 years, 20 something years?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's his life. Like,
Yeah. That's true. That's what it takes. That's what it takes.
this was such a fun conversation. I don't want to end, but I think my camera battery is dying. So it's better that we end it than the camera ending it. So
Amazing.
I really appreciate your time. Thank you for your insights. This was super helpful. I would love to have you for a second episode sometime soon, like, because there's so much I feel like we didn't talk about. So yeah, looking forward to our next episode together.
Thank you. This has been really fun. The camera battery may be finite, but our conversations can be infinite, right?
I love that.
Love that. Cheers to that. Cheers. Cheers to that. Thank you, my friend.
I'm gonna give you bad advice. You heard it right, bad advice.